Welcome to GW Integrative Medicine, the podcast about disease prevention and health promotion from the Office of Integrative Medicine and Health at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences.
I'm Dr. Misha Kogan, Chief Medical Officer at GW Center for Integrative Medicine and Associate Professor here at GW.
And I'm Janet Rodriguez, the office's Administrative Director. Today, we're going to discuss the just released new dietary guidelines for Americans. Dr. Leigh Frame, our favorite nutrition scientist, co-host of the pod and co-director of the Frame-Corr Lab here at GW, is our guest.
Not quite a guest, but we'll take it. Leigh is an associate professor in Department of Clinical Research and Leadership and Physician Assistant Studies. Dr. Frame combines nutrition and immunity through translational research, leveraging extensive experience in biomedical research and education.
Dr. Frame earned her PhD in Human Nutrition and MHS in Immunology from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She graduated with distinction in biochemistry from the Mary Baldwin College. An expert on integrative medicine and the gut microbiome, she's also my boss here at the Office of Integrative Medicine and Health.
Well, she's also my boss as well. And Leigh, let's get straight into it. My first question is going to be a little funny. So, the new guidelines had a bunch of experts. Why weren't you on there? We would
That's an
expect that
interesting
you should have
question.
been in there.
Well, I would have loved to have been, but to be honest, I think that would have been wasted effort because they did not use the expert panel report in the making of these guidelines. They actually said they were going to send them aside because they didn't believe they were based on science.
Okay, well, I think that's a good way to drop right into it. So let's
I
get into it.
I agree. Okay, so for people who may not really be familiar with them, what are the dietary guidelines for Americans? Who puts them out and why?
That's a really important place to start because I think a lot of people don't understand what their purpose is. And part of the conversations you hear are actually because they don't understand that. So they're actually designed for professionals. They are not designed for the average person to read or understand. They are designed so that clinicians, registered dietitians, you name it, people who are in this space, chefs who work in large clinics or large kitchens, so they understand what food policy is. And that the biggest impact you see is in our school system. So these dictate the meals that our children are eating. And that's really what they're designed to do. Now, it would be nice if they were also easy enough to read or they had some piece of information you could take out and the average person could understand. And I think over the years they've kind of done a little more of that. That was the idea with My Plate, was that it was more visual and the average person could actually understand it. But they're really not designed for that. They're designed for a professional to understand it, and then that professional is supposed to translate it to the average person.
Now, you mentioned My Plate. What's My Plate?
My Plate, everybody forgets about My Plate. It's actually what the dietary guidelines for Americans were for the last 20 years or so. And the idea is that
So no food pyramid.
there was not a food pyramid. No, the food pyramid was a little confusing. Let's be real. It was a little confusing. And so the idea is, what are you actually eating? You're eating food on a plate. And so they tried to break up the plate in a way with the food group so you could see, all right, you should eat mostly plants and have lean proteins. And there was also a glass of milk there, which we could debate for a long time. But whether you need milk or not is a whole other thing. But
As an
it,
adult.
as an adult, exactly. But it's something that you could look at and sort of understand. And so that was nice. And now we're going back to the pyramid, which is interesting for a lot of reasons. And it seems to me that it was actually quite intentional because they wanted to make the point that the old pyramid was wrong. And I'm not going to disagree with that. I can't remember what the numbers were. It's been so long, but it was like 6 servings of grain a day. Like that's a lot. It was probably wrong. But that being said, I think we're talking more about a nuance of being wrong as opposed to like everything it was wrong. So I think that thinking about the old pyramid as being 100% incorrect is 100% incorrect, right? Nothing is ever completely wrong. And I would say that's true for the new pyramid as well. I wouldn't say that it's 100% incorrect, but there are certainly some things that are at the very least confusing, if not perhaps inaccurate.
Well, and it's also visually awful because, you have the inverted pyramid where you don't even know where the important part is, at the top or the bottom.
Yes.
It's
That was
very,
confusing to me as
yeah,
well because you typically think of the foundation as being what is most important, which is what the
right,
old pyramid was.
right. And
From a
here
graphic
it's,
design
yeah,
point, it's a jumbled mess.
right, right.
It is a little
There's
difficult, and
no,
it is it saying that chicken is better than ground beef, which is better than fish if you're going down the graphic, or is it just saying anything in that is good? It's hard to understand what the intention of the graphic is.
So let's go into that. So there are a lot of changes, right? So this one compared to how things were changed in kind of stepwise here, you have this massive, completely dramatic changes. So how about this, Leigh? Outline for listeners the largest changes before we go into some, fine-grained details.
Yeah, so the largest changes are in the graphic in the pyramid. The fact that we're moving away from saying things like reducing red meat intake. Now that's completely gone. Or uh, the recommendation for saturated fat is still there to keep your saturated fat intake under 10% of calories. However, if you look at the graphic, it almost seems like it's gone. Because if you were to follow this graphic and eating this much meat and this much cheese and dairy that's all full fat, it would be hard to stick with that 10% saturated fat. Now, I'm not anti-whole dairy. I'm really not. I'm really more pro fermented dairy. Everyone should be on fermented dairy. And it's not
you're
as much
talking
about.
Misha's
No, it's Lee's. It's she the one who
Misha's a huge
taught
fan.
me to.
No, you've been bringing it up a lot at them
Yeah,
in a
but
mindfulness experience.
that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Okay,
Well,
getting
it's
back on
I
Wait,
track.
I so if I was going to make these guidelines, I would have just the fermented dairy on there, and then it wouldn't really matter whether it was whole or not because you're getting so many health benefits from it.
well, but they
It's
to
great.
to give them a credit, like if you look at the like towards the top of that inverted
There is yogurt, yeah.
base, there is yogurt,
Yeah.
and I
But
kind of like that.
above it is the carton of milk.
Right,
So I
right,
would have
exactly.
certainly
So
reversed those two.
I probably would have
If it's
removed
even
them. I would
in
have
a
removed it
hierarchy, I don't
altogether.
know that it is. I would have removed it altogether too, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
yeah,
So
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 that's the
so
big
so
one.
Okay.
so saturated fat didn't necessarily change, despite the fact that RFK in presentation said we're ending the war on saturated fat,
That is correct.
which was confusing because they didn't change anything in terms of
Correct. The
statement.
recommendation is still the same, which actually most experts are like very relieved to hear because that is
Hmm.
one of the things we understand the best, that a high saturated fat diet, particularly coupled with low fiber intake, leads
Hmm.
to cardiovascular disease. Like that's very well understood.
Hmm.
Now, in the past, our messaging has not been clear. There was the idea that people didn't understand that there were different types of fat. And so what we did is we oversimplified the message and told everyone to reduce the fat intake. Everybody remembers in the
Hmm.
90s where all of a sudden these low fat cookies were healthy. No, they were never healthy. But like that was the idea was we knew the saturated fat was the problem, but people underestimated the average person's ability to understand what that meant. And so
Mhm.
now we were trying to say, no, it's the saturated fat. But then if you look at the pyramid, the top of the left-hand pyramid is mostly things that are high in saturated fat. So if truly that's what you're supposed to eat the most of, I'm not sure how you can do that and meet the 10% calorie restriction requirements.
Hmm. Hmm. So let's kind of alternate bad and good. So there's one really good concrete thing, right? There is this war on ultra processed foods that I think everybody is like this one thing that I think everybody's going to agree on, and
Well,
and it's
everybody does not agree on that, unfortunately.
And
Um,
and they also are encouraging eating whole foods along with that. So
right,
that's very
right,
yes,
positive.
right,
agreed.
right.
Very positive, and I say very similar things myself. The one caveat that I would never say to never eat something because I
Mm,
think that's too strong.
right.
And when something is totally off limits, it then becomes forbidden fruit. So that to me is always I
Hmm.
don't like those words. I like the idea of basing your diet on whole foods. That doesn't mean you can never have a Dorito, right? Like I don't think eating one Dorito is going to hurt anyone. I really don't. But having large amounts of Doritos or having them regularly could certainly become a problem. And
Hmm.
I'm not going to argue against that for sure. But then on the flip side, it almost makes it seem like one of the critiques I've seen is, well, if it's a processed meat, does that mean it's better than a processed grain? Because the meat part of the pyramid is good, right? So is having bacon okay? And in fairness, they did say that meats with added processifying agents and sugar should be limited. But
Hmm.
I think the idea is this is muddied. The message here is a little muddy, and maybe it can be refined in a way that it will be better because this is such a good thing, right? Like a reduction of ultra processed foods or eliminating ultra processed foods in your diet could be a really positive thing if it can be clearly communicated. But as is, I mean, the experts are confused, so I can imagine that the average person is confused.
Well, I think my sense of the intent here was to simplify things, right? It's because the
I
prior
think so.
guidelines were like over 100 pages. Here, they shrank everything down. They tried to
Well, they have two versions in fairness. The
simplify.
full version is
Right.
250 pages. So,
Well, the one, if you go to the main page, the one that you
Mhm.
go from there is like 90 pages, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, agreed.
And then there's a full one that's
And
not
then the
easy to
website
find.
is like very flashy and
Yes.
exciting, and
Yeah.
that's never been the dietary guidelines. And maybe that's why no one knows what my plate is. So I'm
Right.
kind of
Right.
hopeful that this different approach might reach different people. And frankly, that has always the real problem. Americans do not follow the dietary guidelines for Americans.
Yes.
That has
Hmm.
always been the case. People say that it's because the guidelines were based on grains. Well, no one's following them, so it almost doesn't matter what they say, right? If we could get people to follow anything even remotely close to the dietary guidelines, it would be an improvement on their current diet.
Hmm. I think that's a very important point. Yeah, I mean, I think if you kind of ask general average person, you highlighted in the beginning that people didn't even know that we don't have pyramid for a decade plus.
Right,
Everybody still discussed pyramids. Yeah.
exactly.
Um,
And people
I'm
who
going.
would consider themselves nutrition experts, right, would still said that because they learned nutrition through other pathways than academia.
so let's talk about the point that I think is going to be one of the most, not necessarily right or wrong here, but just almost challenging for a lot of people, right? So this idea that you can eat they specifically said eat the mixed protein, right? The mix of an animal and plant, but there
Correct.
was zero statement about what should, like, should you limit at all animal protein. There was not a
Correct.
statement. In fact,
It
they
it
actually
almost
kind of
sounds like it's
say
unlimited when if
that's
you look at
it.
the pyramid. Like to
That's
me, it
right.
looks unlimited.
Yeah, I mean, the whole chicken there sits right
Just
on
eat
the
a whole
top.
chicken. It's fine.
Eat the whole chicken and that's your meal, right? I do
Now,
like,
did you notice where legumes and nuts are located?
Well, they're really hard to see.
Yes. They're
And actually,
hard to see and it's hard
and the
to
only
tell what
legume
they
we have is
are,
peanuts.
except
So
for the
yeah,
peanut shell.
yeah.
It's
so,
like,
and well,
okay.
and the other, and they did actually bump up amount of protein per kilogram substantially, which,
Substantially, almost
I,
double.
well,
Yeah.
as a geriatrician, I was like, oh my God, finally, thank you.
And
You
for
know,
your population,
oh my God,
100%.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, and it's also
But
gonna
for,
send,
say, I don't know, a 25-year-old who is completely
right.
sedentary, I don't think that they need that high of an intake. And is
And
that going to hurt their longevity?
and if it's all animal protein, I mean, we
Correct.
also do know that
Hmm.
probably risk of cancers combined is going to go up here quite a bit,
Right.
right? If you eat all of this in red meat. So,
Right. Well, and not even just animal versus plant, right? Like if they're like, okay, this is my tech to I can have as much steak as I want,
right,
that's a very different than I'm gonna eat seafood and chicken and meat, and I'm gonna eat also a lot of plant protein. These are all very
right,
different, but looking at the pyramid, they don't seem different.
right. There's no clarity at all. Like, how do you even approach this in there?
Right.
But I think in all fairness, this idea that there is a substantial undertaking of protein is an important message. I expect that a lot of um, pure plant-based groups are going to be really upset, but more importantly, the people who
I have
follow
seen some
them,
backlash already.
right,
Yeah.
people who follow them going to be very confused because I think the idea of eating more protein is good, but if you're a vegan, how are you going truly to
It's challenging
achieve?
to eat
It's going
more.
to be
Yeah.
very challenging to
Very.
eat
Hmm.
I mean,
first,
and probably high calorie intake if you're going to be doing it that way too. That's always one of the
right,
challenging things about being vegetarian or vegan is to get enough protein. Often your carb intake goes up, and then
hmm
that can increase your calories. it's again, none of these things are impossible, but we're talking about 1.6 grams per kilogram of protein. That's a very high protein goal.
That's a
And
very high
I
protein
don't know
goal,
how you're
yeah.
going to eat all the things on the right, let alone the stuff at the bottom of the pyramid, right? The vegetables and fruit are going to be difficult, let alone the whole grains.
Right, right. I mean, the range is 1.2 to 1.6. So yes, but even if you take the lowest range of 1.2, if you're an average person of
Which, by the way,
70
is what the
kilos,
average American is getting every day, is 1.2.
really? Is that the
Yes,
statistics?
that is the
That,
statistics
but
in inmanes.
that's probably because there's a big chunk of population who will eat the steak a day, right? So I think there's a lot of the averaging going on, I would
Yeah,
assume.
there's certainly a lot of averaging going on there, but I think it speaks to the fact that there's not a protein deficiency epidemic in the United States, whereas it almost is being presented as if there is. Like people are
Hmm.
not getting enough protein. And if the average American is already in that higher rate, the recommendations before were 0.8 grams per kilogram. Now we're talking about
Hmm.
1.2, and the average American is already at 1.2, then I don't think we have this huge epidemic of protein deficiency. Now,
Hmm.
certain populations,
Right,
yes, for sure. But I
right.
feel like that's one of those we should really have, a special message for people who are of a certain age or who are incredibly physically active and need to work about recovery.
Hmm.
And they're never going to be the same as the average person. And that's the problem with having this is a public health guidance, right? This is not to speak to what Misha should be eating or to what
Right.
Janet should be eating or what Leigh should be eating. There, it's not a personalized approach and it's never going to fit every person. It is that average, which means for actually most people it's wrong, right? If you're taking the
Hmm.
average, most people it's going to be wrong. But it's a guideline for you to figure out like what's the ballpark that you should be in.
Mhm.
And now the ballpark has gotten much higher on the protein, which for some people is really positive, and for other people I think they're going to find very challenging.
All right, I think there's one other big piece for me that's concerning, very concerning, right? So the way that alcohol was presented
Oh,
was
Yes.
kind of not only does it go against completely everything we've heard before, but just to say that, oh, there are blue zones that drinking a lot of alcohol, that's just not true. I
It's
mean,
not true,
yeah,
yeah.
there are blue zones that drink some alcohol, but you have to
But it's
put
not a
that.
lot.
Well, it's not a lot, and it's not necessarily every day. It has to be
Correct. And it's
put.
always with food and
It's
it's always
always
with
with
people.
food, and it's very slow, and it's in a big
Yeah.
community. It's over periods of time,
Yeah.
you know. And so, like equating it just to say, oh, if the blue zone drinks, 5 drinks, it's okay. Like that
But
moderation.
they didn't even provide any guidance like that.
That's
Like if
right,
we said 5 drinks a week, then that actually would probably be in line with a lot of the guidance. But that's
right. But
not
they
there. It
didn't.
just says to
Right.
drink less.
Well,
And
it says
I don't know
drink
what
in
that means.
moderation. Drink in moderation. I mean, we know that probably no alcohol is safe, period. Like, the fact
Correct.
that
Every
some
drink increases your risk for cancer.
that's
and
it.
the other thing is, one person's moderation is not another person's
That's
moderation.
it. Right.
Years ago,
Especially
I
when it
had to
comes to
go through
alcohol.
some
Yeah.
training to serve alcohol at an event. And the person from the Department of Health went around to everybody and asked them, how many drinks do you have a week? How many drinks do you have a week? At that time, I was young, so it was probably like one, two, maybe three. But this one guy was like, yeah, I have like 6 to 8 beers all the time.
Oh, and
And it was
using
like,
the rule that most physicians use, he's totally lying. You have to at least double it.
yes. So, okay. So, my moderation was not his moderation.
Yeah,
Even
Right,
for the
exactly.
whole entire male female differences,
true. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
previous guidelines would say that men could have twice as much as women, right? They could have up to 2 drinks a day. Women could have up to one. But there was some real debate as to whether those numbers were really grounded in the most recent science when you
Mm-hmm.
take cancer into account.
Right. And
Yes.
I think the most recent science is very clear. I mean, if you're going to drink anything, any additional drink, it's just, your risk is quickly goes up. It's not even slowly, it's
Correct.
just quickly. And I think
And
that
maybe
that
having one glass over, an hour or 2 hour period while having a leisurely dinner with your family doesn't have that because
right,
the exposure is so low and you're having it with
right.
food. And that's what we see in the blue zones. But then you can't just simply extrapolate that to average people who also are probably kind of all those drinks in one sitting, let alone over the
Yeah.
week.
And
There's
what
there's a
got me,
reason why it's a blue zone.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you're right. It's
What
unusual.
what got me really upset at this particular is like this whole section of how alcohol is a social lubricant. I'm like, come on. Like that you can't say that. Right? First of all, we have way better social
I mean, it's
lubricants, you know.
accurate, but it's not
Yeah, but
a
it's
positive
accurate,
thing.
but it's not a positive thing, right? So
Yeah,
if our entire society needs a social lubricant, what is it telling us about us, right?
right. There's bigger
So
problems.
so and plus we have much safer lubricants. I mean, we can,
True.
you know, we can
That's a
talk
whole
about
other
all that. I mean, a whole
podcast.
podcast about, you know, like what substances. There are a lot of herbs, there's cannabis, there's kava. I mean, there's so many things that potentially substantially safer than alcohol.
Yeah. Maybe even
And
matcha, right? There's
anything
so
that
many
gives
things that we
you
could.
exactly coffee, like anything that gives you a little bit of a shift in the perception in terms of interaction with other people, you can start discussing. But here we're talking about toxin, which is normalized, which
And that's
unfortunately
the problem, is it's
concerning.
normalized and it's part of the
Yeah,
culture, and there's this backlash about changing the culture. And I think that's what we're really seeing here. It's like
yeah.
they don't want to see, and the same thing I think honestly with the meat and dairy. I think it's more of a shift on the culture. There's been a lot of people who've been putting this out there, and I don't know that I agree with it, but they're saying they think that the meat and dairy lobby had a hand in this. I don't know if that's accurate. I think it's more of a cultural thing. Like people
Yeah, I
are
think so
seeing us
too.
shifting away from where America was and wanting to push us back. Um, but I think that was progress. And again, I'm not saying don't eat red meat.
Hmm.
Just don't base your diet on red meat I think everybody, I hope now realizes that like people are not having steak every day. And we never did before, right? Like that's not even reeling back into reality. Steak was a very expensive thing that you did not have on a regular basis. I
Hmm.
do appreciate having the ground beef in there because that's something that would have been more realistic, right? You would have made a
Hmm.
stew or a casserole and it would have been really stretched. You would have small
Hmm.
amounts of it. And if we are going back to that, then maybe we would be making sense. But if we're talking about
Hmm.
having a steak every night, that's a very different conversation.
So overall, Lee, what do you think the general public health implications are going to be here?
The major public health implications are going to be in our schools, some of which could be conceived as positive. For instance, now that we are allowed to have full fat dairy, they will be allowed to have whole milk. And there is some indication that perhaps whole milk may be a healthier choice in some ways because
Hmm.
otherwise kids choose strawberry or chocolate milk, right? Because it
Hmm.
doesn't taste
Mm.
good. And so they're
Hmm.
getting exposed to a lot more sugar. And so
Hmm.
if we're getting rid of a sugar sweetened beverage, maybe that's a positive thing. Now, the number of calories are maybe going up, and we do have an obesity crisis. So, you know, yet to be seen on that.
Hmm.
The other thing is a lot of what's served in schools is these highly processed foods, right? And particularly on the grain side. Like, think about the pizza they have in schools. It's like the worst quality, it's barely food. Uh, and
Hey, that Friday pizza.
right,
And
exactly.
I think it's just like it's just frozen. They just
Right, they don't make
Oh
anything
yeah,
anymore.
they just stick
yeah,
it in a microwave
yeah.
probably.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's going to change. And that's a really, really positive thing, right? We can no longer have our kids subsisting on highly refined flour because it's not going to be allowed. Because this literally says what you can feed the kids in our school system. So I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of positive things potentially. The other things, because they are kind of wishy-washy, right? We don't have like a specific, I mean, I think they have specific guidelines for how many servings of vegetables and fruit you should have. And actually, that's really interesting. If you look at, I think it's 3 servings of fruit and 5 servings of vegetables a day, or maybe it's four.
Mhm.
But the grains have almost the same number of servings. So
Hmm.
that kind of confused me.
Well,
Like,
and also like it's not practical. Like imagine eating that. Like
no,
it's
it's a
gonna have
lot of grains.
crazy amount of calories. Totally.
Correct. Correct. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure how the actual implementation of this is going to happen
Hmm.
because it's kind of unclear. But if you look at the pyramid and you think about like the major contributors to what's unhealthy in our food system, I think it
Hmm.
could be really positive. And I hope that those are the lessons that will be taken home from this. And I actually have a colleague who was saying, the one thing I like about this is like you could take anything you want out of it. And he's like, I'm going to take the things that I like and I'm going to run with them. I'm like, all right, I'll do it too. Like, I'm going to take all the good things and I'm going to run with them. And like, this is what the dietary guidelines say.
Well, that was what Misha was saying before we
Yeah.
even started this discussion. But hey, how do you think all of this is going to affect my plate?
Oh, my plate's gone.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's
This is
gone.
replacing my plate.
Yeah, it's replacing it.
Really?
But that
Oh.
doesn't, the Harvard healthy plate will still be around, which I
Okay.
think is superior to my plate anyway.
Hmm.
So, and more
And the Canadian
evidence-based.
Well, and
version.
also like
The Canadian version is nice.
and also I think a lot of clinicians who got to use this idea, think of a plate of a bunch of different colors.
You're right.
It's such a good visual. Like, what
It's
are you
much
now
easier.
you're gonna tell people eat reverse pyramid of different colors like that? Like that's like
Yeah,
it
it's not
doesn't, the image
applicable.
doesn't work. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, agreed. So I think that my plate, for people who know that it exists, it will never be gone because it has had this effect on how we think about talking about food. And that's where the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate came from too, that I
Hmm.
use. And it's a much more understandable way to think about diet. So it's certainly not going to be forgotten, but it will not be the official guidelines of the US government anymore.
All right, so we said we're not going to go politics here, which we try not to, but and it's not necessarily a political question, but it kind of sort of is. So it's very clear message to the food industry that ultra processed foods are out.
Yeah.
And and something like, and Lee, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I don't know, but my presumption is that probably about a half of all the foods that are produced in America could be classified ultra processed.
Correct.
So it's a,
It's actually higher.
higher. Okay. So, well, I'd hope you'd say that. So that means that there's going to be a profound political shift in how our food is made.
Yeah.
Now, do we have any sense of timing here? Because obviously industry cannot shift, right? I mean, it's going to
No, these
take,
are huge infrastructures. They do not shift
right.
overnight. That
S-
being said, they have been shifting on their own accord because of consumer demand. So there's
mhm.
already been a bit of a shift. So it's not like they're starting from scratch. And they can certainly scale up the things they've already done and then get rid of the ones like Twinkie's in trouble. I don't know. I don't know how Twinkie's gonna hold on. Um,
Well, I think some comfort foods will,
I feel like there are better comfort foods than Twinkie. I've never understood it, but if it was something that was part of my childhood, then I probably would understand it. Maybe more tasty cake. I'm from Philly, right? So that might get to me more. But I think that there are certain things that we're gonna see just drop off because they're not going to make business sense for them to make because they're going to
Mhm.
sell them in schools. People are going to stay away from them. But other things are a little bit more subtle. Like, for instance, cereals, a lot of breakfast cereals because we do not actually have a definition for what ultra processed foods are,
Mhm.
it's unclear where they're going to fit in that.
So
And
you're saying
so,
something like they're gonna simply stick a label, no ultra processed food, and then it's still gonna be the same,
I
potentially.
think they could have an argument for that because it's not been clearly defined. Now,
Hmm.
the USDA is working on a definition of that. And I think once there's a clear definition, what's going to happen is there's going to be somebody who's going to find a loophole, right? That's always how it works.
There's
And this is a
always a
hard
loophole
thing
or
to put your
several
finger.
Right.
loopholes.
Right.
So I think the
Right.
ultimate thing you need to do is really be your own advocate and try and choose foods. I actually wish we didn't get rid of the artificial colors because I think they're a really good way to say that you shouldn't be eating this food, right? They're a marker of ultra processed foods, and there are other additives, emulsifiers, stabilizers, preservatives that are also really good markers of ultra processed foods. So if you're seeing a lot of things in there that are clearly additives, and there are also apps now, right, that you can scan. It's gotten so much easier. So I think
Mhm.
being your own advocate is always going to be the best thing. But hopefully, this is going to make it a little easier for the average person because a lot of the worst products are going to go away.
Hmm. Well, so the reason I thought you were part of this before I even read you actually were part of it was because there's a first time in any guidelines, there's a whole chunk on probiotics and
And
prebiotics,
fermented
right?
foods.
And ferment, and it's
Yes,
like, and it's actually well written. I was like, it must be Dr. Frame
it was
because
good. It was very good. I agree. I
so
was very
so
excited about that part.
tell us a little bit about how they like, what's the sort of scope of that in there and what do they say?
So it's like a side note, but it's a box, right? It's a call out. It's like, hey, read me. So that's
Hmm.
exciting. And I think that's one of the examples where, and I don't know if I should sign on to this, but like throwing out the science is good because the microbiome and gut health science is new and it
Hmm.
doesn't reach the level of evidence that we would need to be included in the dietary guidelines for Americans traditionally. For instance, the report that was put out for the original version of the guidelines that was then set aside does not have anything about that. It also, while it talks about ultra-processed foods, it says that the evidence hasn't reached the level yet to be included. And so there's some benefit to saying we're not going to hold this to the highest standard. And this is one of those. On the flip side, I also think that like fermented foods have been around for thousands of years, right? And there's this historic knowledge about their benefit that shouldn't be discounted. I'm not sure that was included because I have no idea how these were made. Like we don't know how they were
Well,
made.
no,
I do know
but
JFK is a big fermented food fan.
and
So
it says like they're actually stating in there, eat fermented foods daily. Like I think
yes,
it's
which
stated
I
in there,
totally
which
agree with.
I
In fact,
completely
if
agree with
anything,
too.
the
Yeah.
literature would say more than daily, right? You should
Right.
have them multiple times a day.
Right.
But hey, that's a great first start, and I completely agree with it. And I think that in my mind, there is enough evidence to recommend that to an individual person. I don't know if it rises to the public health. Like it's that's a
hmm
really high bar to say that everybody should be doing this. Now, I'm going to say that everybody should be doing this, but for the US government, I mean, that's the highest level of evidence.
Yeah, and I felt that pretty much for me, those were the two biggest positive shifts, right? So aggressive push to get rid of ultra-processed foods and at least in acknowledge that
Yeah.
probiotics, well, let's not say probiotics, let's
It's
just say
because that's not a
fermented foods.
food. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. So let's just say fermented foods. I think that was a very positive shift.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. And I think if we, like I said, if we focus on those elements and we take our own personal spin on this pyramid, which I think is very easy to do, it could end up being very, very positive. We just need to play down the negative elements, or maybe just not work on them at all. Like the fact that it says have less alcohol, we can run with that and frame that how we think it should be. Like, right, look, the literature is showing clearly that every drink of alcohol you have increases your risk for cancer.
right, exactly.
Now, knowing that if you still want to drink alcohol, that's your prerogative, right?
hmm
And we do have recommendations for how much you should try and limit it to 1 glass a day for women, 2 glasses a day for men.
hmm Well, I have one big concern. My newest American discovery through my friend JD has been Buc-ee's.
Oh, I went to Buc-ee's too for the first time.
It's a cultural well, people, it's a cultural experience. Like
Yes,
I will tell you, I
I
was
was shocked.
I
It
was
is a
shocked.
cultural experience.
It's like an IKEA of
I don't
gas
think there's
station.
anything more American than Buc-ee's
There's nothing
meals.
more. So I'm now very concerned that Buc-ee's won't survive. But I said we're
So
gonna
they make
use.
almost everything from scratch, other than like the stuff that's in the
That's
aisles.
actually
So
true. That's true. And I think they're jerky. At least they're claiming that
they
they're,
make it from scratch.
preservative free and that
Hmm
they're reasonably made. So I hope, I
Who
hope
knows
that,
what they're adding to it, but at least they have control
right,
over it, so they
right.
can
Well,
change it.
hopefully, and also they have time to change, right? They can adapt and they can put
Yeah,
in
we don't
more
know what that timeline's
healthier
going to be,
foods.
but this administration has certainly been quite reasonable with their previous recommendations for businesses. So I don't see this being some sort of like, you have to fix everything now.
Right.
I think there's probably going to be a lot of market-driven change.
Good.
Wow. It's hilarious that we brought up Buc-ee's as we
I'm
wrap up
sorry.
this episode.
I had to because like
Oh,
we were
Lord.
driving to a wedding and pulled over and stopped there and I think this is the last time I had gluten because I couldn't resist it. I got like
Oh
the
yeah, though
whole.
they do have brisket, which is
Yes, that's what
gluten-free.
well, no, I think we had a brisket and we had like a burger or something. I can't quite
Mm.
remember. Oh, no, no. No, it was brisket. It was just with beer. That's what it was.
Ah.
I couldn't, yes. It was like I think that was the last time I had beer. It was about, what is it, 5, 6 months ago. And I was just like we were sitting on a curb of the gas station eating, and I was like, oh my God, this is I'm fully Americanized.
Yes, you are.
Yes, yes, you
Oh.
are. All right, friends. I think that was a great discussion. Thanks for doing this, y'all. I organized this like in the course of what, 24 hours? Because
About
I was like, we really need to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so uh I just would like to encourage people to check out My Plate. If you what was the
Harvard Healthy Eating Plate. We can put a link in the show notes for
Harvard
sure.
Yeah,
Healthy Eating
definitely.
Plate?
When we put it on YouTube, we're definitely
We'll
gonna have
include all that
links.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, Misha, sign us out.
Well, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Frame. This is Misha Kogan.
This is the GW Integrative Medicine podcast from the GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health. He is Dr. Misha Kogan. I am Janet Rodriguez, and
Thanks for
Misha,
listening.
there you go.